I want to talk a little bit about the Farewell My Mailbox essay. And I really want you to read that before you hear this essay. So if you haven't read it already, you just please pause and then read it. So let's just kind of look at some things that will be profitable for us in this class. For example, one thing that I stress a lot is that an effective writer is going to not ever build something that doesn't sell. All right, so what I mean by that is think about the readability of what you're writing. And again, this really works well if you imagine that you're writing for someone sitting in an airport lobby that is looking through a magazine and does not have to read your article. Pretend your article is in there, see, and this person can just flip past it and find something else to read if your article doesn't create interest, maintain it, and reward it. So your first job is to create interest, and we're really, it's also to be sure that you are writing on something that you can imagine somebody wanting to read. Okay, so that's what I mean by don't create something that you can never sell. Don't write something that in fact nobody actually is going to ever want to read on their own in terms of leisure reading, things like that. So then you're faced with the question, well, how would I ever, what could I ever say about these two pieces that somebody would want to read? Well, see, that's just it. I mean, that's where creativity comes into it. What can you bring to the table in your depth connection when you try to make that will actually turn the corner on this, and all of a sudden have you really realize, wow, that's an interesting way to look at this. That's a new perspective that I can use and apply to other areas. See, you've given them a tool of thinking or an insight that they can think about and see how strong it is and how maybe it applies to other areas. That's why all of a sudden they might realize, I'm glad I stayed with this. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I bought this. You know what I'm saying? So you actually can make a sale there. Well, that metaphor is already used up, I think. So let's go ahead and move on. Notice the short title, Farewell My Mailbox. Easy to see, and it has a sort of Now notice how he said my mailbox, right? And so literally, it's just he's saying goodbye to his mailbox. He's not saying that the USPS is doing away with mail. So in that way, he's sort of making sure that he's stretching the limit of what he can actually say in print without being, held accountable for libel or for misinformation. But the title does have sort of a shock value to it, doesn't it? If you actually read those three words and comprehend them, you're like, is this essay going to tell me something I didn't know about the U.S. mail, that it's going out of business? By the way, a quick timeout. A lot of times, this essay is dated. I think it's already 12, 13 years old. And as I keep on using this video, it's just going to get older still. It's 2023 now, and I think they made it in 2011 or something. I use material like that not because the content is relevant to today's world, but because these are great teaching tools. This essay really lends itself as a good artifact to work with when a student is trying to learn, a certain writing technique. So that's why I stick with any sort of article that I have on this class that is an old article. It's just because it is, first, it might be a great article that's still relevant in terms of its philosophical analysis on perennial issues of human life and experience. By perennial, I mean these are issues that don't go away. They come back every year, just like a perennial plant, okay? Perennial means returning, everlasting, long enduring, right? And so some old articles are very good because they deal with perennial issues. But here, he's making a point about the finances of the USPS and how that's going to, okay, he doesn't say it's going out of business or not, right? But he lets you kind of think that. Now, Notice also that as he begins his essay, Bob Greene, who is a great writer. I'm not saying that because I personally like him or I like his work. He's just stayed the course. He's a long tenured editorial, writer, syndicated writer, and he has been well received by the thinking public. So, I'm in no way am I feel like you can watch a master here. In fact, okay. Um, but notice how he starts very quickly, right? Because his job is to create interest, and that is to by the title, and then the longer you stay with him and move down his text, the more of a chance you're going to keep on going, right? So he presents an introduction to his writing, a gateway, if you will, that is very very easy to deal with. Very, very short paragraphs. By the way, you mark paragraphs by indentation or by white space between the paragraphs, or both. But usually it's one or the other. And for web documents, web files, websites, web pages, that sort of thing, it's the overwhelming trend is just to put white space between the paragraphs. So that's one way. If you ever are working with, say, a website and you have to count the paragraphs because you want to quote from paragraph 6 or whatever, just every line or every couple of lines that has a white space between them and the next grouping of lines is a paragraph. So here, even though some of these or many of the opening material, much of the opening material, are just one-liners, since he's putting white space between them, they really are paragraphs. He's got like 10. He opens up with 10 incredibly short paragraphs, or 11. Some of you count them, but boy, you just slide down that, don't you? And some of these paragraphs. Now, notice the ones that are kind of making shocking claims are not claim making at all. They're questions, right? Because again, he knows how to frame this to get you in sort of a, what's going on here mode. Kind of a little bit of shock value here, but he's not actually saying that, for example, that the United States Postal Service is going to do away with Saturday mail. That's a question mark. And then he has some information about how this is happening in some areas, right, but not all. So he is kind of playing you a little bit, but in a very legitimate way, because when you think about it, he has framed his wording very carefully there to not actually say what you think he's saying. Well, anyway, pretty soon you get into the meat of his thought, and he's still working with the facts of what's going on here. Oh, by the way, another quick aside here, because I think I'm going to forget it if I don't mention it now. Another great way to create interest is to bring on a photo or a graphic or something and put it in your work. You're always welcome to do that for me, but if you're writing for another professor, just follow their rules. They might not want pictures in their writing, or they might have a very specific view on that, and whatever. You play with their rules when you're in their classroom. But for me, sure, you can bring photos in if you want to. If you're making a Word document or something like that, you can just copy, paste it in, do all that sort of thing. But see, Bob Greene is using a stock photo here because someone just, probably an editor choice, an assistant editor, just took a stock photo of a blue mailbox. All right. And so, sure, if you want to use stock photos, that's fine. If the photo is not a stock photo, then it's a pertinent photo. It's a photo that relates to some specific thing in your paper. If you're talking about a certain person, this is a photo of the person itself. If you're talking about a certain event or act, this is a photo of that. So that's not stock, but instead what I would call a custom photo, because it's custom to that writing. And you're welcome to do that too if you're researching or you feel like you can take a photo of whatever you're writing about. You just pull out your phone, do that, whatever. Okay. So those visual elements also create interest. And if you question that or don't really see that in terms of how powerful it is, just imagine trying to read a magazine that just had a white page and just the black ink in the text. That would be very unusual, to be sure. So a color and graphic and all that, obviously those are also creating interest. But Bob Greene is creating it to share with his thought process. He doesn't have to have fancy photos to get you going on this. So anyway, some things I want to point out to you because they're commendable is uh, is the way he doesn't overwhelm you with source work, but in the text itself, he gives you the name of the person and sometimes what they're affiliated with, a university or a website or whatever, and then he tells you their quote. Okay, so that's called well, it's a type of in-text citation. Okay, because you're making sure that you're giving source names and things like that in your actual sentencing. Now, Bob Greene does not have the parentheses at the end, telling you a page number or a paragraph number that sometimes is very much advocated for and used in college writing or academic writing in a training situation like a university situation. But uh, you know, that would be called parenthetical citation because it's happening within the parentheses. And both are types of citations within a text. So both kind of are referred to as in-text citation, but right here, this is the way Greene is doing it is he's integrating those names and those organizations that the person works for and the quote. He's integrating it very well into his text. All right, I want you to imitate that. I want you to imitate that. So when you read good authors, always look for good habits to copy, and that's one of them. Now, to continue going though, he does present some data, and he gives you information from 3 cities as far as what's happening with their blue street corner mailboxes, right? And if you look at those 3 cities, he's actually trying to give you a snapshot that covers the geography of the United States. The East Coast, the Middle, and the West Coast. Um, and that's very commendable too. This sort of writing is not meant to be heavy on the information because it's along the lines of sort of a casual read, right? And when's the last time you've read a magazine article or a newspaper article, and at the end it's all this, you get a source list, and a bibliography. We don't do that. Which, as an aside, I want to tell you there's a lot of trust that is going on there, right? Because we are trusting CNN in this case that they have fact checked, Farewell My Mailbox. We're trusting Bob Greene that he's just not making this up, right? And journalists know about that trust and protect it. Now, often there are, there are breaches of that trust, and you'll find out about this and that sort of thing. But as you just live your life in America, you'll find someone who made up a story or who faked this or faked that, and there's obviously breaches of the trust. But you need to respect and honor that trust because that is the right thing to do. And so he's asking us to trust him, on his data, but he is giving us names of who said what and who they're affiliated with, and sometimes what study it's involved with, and that sort of thing. So if you were to Google all of that, maybe you could find that quote or that statistics and check it online for yourself. Because of the powerful tools we have now in terms of just the information at our fingertips with the World Wide Web, fact checking and source notation and all that is in a way been simplified because it's just so easy for a lot of us to check these things on our own. So the onus of like really laying it out exactly where you got it and what is not necessarily so heavily felt in popular writing like websites or CNN or things like that. Okay, but he does a good job with trying to give you a representation of America in terms of major cities. And then he brings in some metaphors and some analogies. And that's also very helpful when you're trying to argue something, when you're trying to make a point or explain something. And this is a very similar case that people readily understand. And if they understand that, they should understand what's happening here because there's so many similarities. So you're welcome to work with analogy, but he does that. He does that well. But I think the best quality here for Bob Greene is that he's able to take a one-layered approach. Okay, in other words, at the beginning, you actually do think it's about the physical mailbox and the physical plants like the post offices, and you think it's about the post office. But a little past the middle, he starts introducing a whole nother layer to what he's doing, to his analysis. Right, he turns that post office box into a symbol, of something, right? Not the American life, but a symbol of the way America allows cooperation between private business and government funding. So this is an example of the government subsidized business, like farming, or like some energy, uh, innovative energy businesses that get tax breaks in order to bring a new product to market, or in this case, the United States Postal Service. How do they stay profitable? And that's the very question that's being addressed here in the essay. And they do bring in some revenue from people who are buying stamps and sending packages. That's certainly correct, but that's never enough. So they have been given the right by Congress to petition Congress for supplementary funds at the end of every year if they need, or every 5 years if they need sort of a soft bailout, if you will, if they need the Congress to appropriate 200 million or 50 million or $100 million to the Postal Service. Congress has a history of doing that because they know that this company, this service, so deeply impacts and benefits the average citizen across the United States. So that's what he's really talking about when he's talking about the blue mailbox. And although that particular example of that sort of partnership or that sort of company, in other words, the United States Postal Service, even though that he's using that one company as an example of this, right? Even though that one company might be on a decline, and in fact might be on its way out, Bob Greene is trying to tell us, be thankful that we live in a land that allows these companies to come and go like this, because one way or another we are going to still benefit in terms of how the government helps us with in partnership with on the ground businesses that are owned and run in a private sort of way. They help us with the core activities that makes the union strong, the union of our of our country strong, or the fabric of our country. Uh, and that's communication. We need to communicate with each other. So this is in the benefit of everyone, and the government is going to try to keep on providing that somehow for us. So he turns the mailbox into a symbol. And that's really where he's going with this. And that's his reward. His reward is for you as a reader, is to say, oh, at the end, you're like, oh, wait a minute, he's talking about something else. And he's like, yeah, you thought I was talking about the post office. I'm really talking about this much deeper thing. And so once the riddle has kind of been solved, there's an intellectual reward there. And it's the very same reward that we get when we hear a good joke. It's, oh, now I see it. Oh, now I got it. And yes, I see the connections, So although I don't think any of us are going to be guffawing at the end of this essay, but it's this mental recognition of what was really at play. That is the little reward that is part of this writing. But remember that, because when people try to summarize this essay for me, sometimes they say that Bob Greene is trying to advocate that we do not let the post office go out of business. But in fact, there's a very interesting metaphor towards the end of the essay where Bob Greene says, as we drive away and as we look in the rearview mirror at this post office box in the street corner. So, his idea is we're actually driving away from this. It's something we're leaving behind. So please don't tell me that he's advocating for, another bailout, or for all of us to go out and double the use, double the amount of stamps we buy or something. He's deeper than that. See what I'm saying? All right. So I've given you some ways to think about this essay. And, go ahead and use this as you try to understand what's going on here, and maybe something I said or something I sparked and you continued the train of thought, somewhere down there you'll find a way to make a depth connection to another article that I give you. If you feel you need to summarize this article, that's fine. Some of the stuff I just talked about right now is something you can quickly provide as a summary, which I think is a good idea. For example, you're watching this essay probably because you have to use this article in an essay that I've assigned. But you, in writing to the public out there, the airport lobby, the 100 people in a room, whatever, the magazine editor that you're going to send this into, as these are hypothetical situations that I want you to play with, so that you understand who you're writing to. You should not assume that those people have read these articles. All right, so you have to provide a really quick summary. This is a great way to open the paper. Quickly summarize what Bob Greene said in this article when it was published, and then then you can do whatever you need to do with it later to fit the template of the essay I'm asking you to work in. But remember, your reader probably has not read this. You should count on your reader not having read this article. So for them to understand what you're talking about, you're going to have a quick moment of summary for them. I think that's a great place to put that, is in the beginning. Okay, thank you for watching.